Welcome back, watch people. Now, just lately we've spoken a lot about stolen watches. We've spoken about the official Rolex Lost and Stolen register. We've spoken to people who have been scammed or robbed of their watches. But today I'm going to tackle the biggest question of all, which is probably, where do these watches go? Where do they end up? I mean, after all, thousands of watches are stolen right across the world. Certainly a lot of watches are stolen here in the UK almost every day of the week. And a lot of people, even myself, would like to know exactly where they end up. But I think I know where most of them end up and how they end up there. And today I'm going to go through that with you guys, see what you think. Now guys, look, for any crime, for any theft to successfully work, there has to be a buyer and there has to be a seller. In other words, there has to be someone that's stealing the goods and then someone that's prepared to buy them. And invariably, I think the vast majority of watches are stolen by closely knit small groups of gangs that invariably either wear the watches themselves, invariably they're stealing them for themselves, and once they get the hang of it, once they get the taste of it, then they'll move on to buying watches to sell to other people. Now, it's my guess, it's my hunch that the vast majority of those lower level criminals actually sell those watches in their own groups. In other words, they are sold at a heavily discounted price with the receiver knowing full well that he's buying a stolen Rolex watch or a stolen Audemars Piguet, a stolen Patek Philippe, whichever the brand may be. And the buyer and the seller, the receiver, they know exactly what they're doing, they know exactly what they're selling, they know exactly what they're buying. And a watch, let's take, any fine watch, a Patek Nautilus, for example, can stay off the market, can stay untracked and untraced and completely lost to the rest of the world for a number of years, whilst it continually changes hands within a small group of people within the underworld, if you like, if that's what you want to call them. I mean, I would just call them criminal scumbags, but at the end of the day, what they're doing is they're passing that watch from one to another and it will stay in that circle for years. Now, many of these watches will actually eventually end up showing up somewhere or other. It might take 1 year, it might take 10 years, but ultimately, a lot of these watches show up where they're sent in for a service. Somewhere like Rolex, for an example, Rolex will pick that up on their lost and stolen register, inform the police, and the watch is recovered, hopefully going back to its rightful owner, or in most cases the insurance company. So why did that watch suddenly reappear onto what you would call the regular open market? Well, I tell you what happens, guys, is that you have your original thief. You have the guy that actually steals the watch. Well, he knows what he's got. He's not going to go and try and sell it to someone, an ordinary member of the public or a watch dealer, etc. He sells it to someone else who he trusts and he knows what the score is. He's not going to go and try and sell it to a watch dealer or to an unsuspecting member of the public either. But 4 or 5 sales down the line, because don't forget, this watch has been sold cheaply for a very long time and it's passed hands cheaply, way below market value, roughly half price, half of what its value is, maybe sometimes as low as a third depending on the model. But what happens is ultimately someone will get greedy, someone will decide that actually, you know what, I'm not going to have the hassle of selling a watch that I know stolen or has a iffy background. I'm going to try and get as much for this watch as humanly possible. I'm going to try and get out of this watch and make a huge profit. And also you have to remember that the story thins out. Every time the watch is sold on, the initial sale will be something like, look, this watch is as hot as, whatever you do, don't take it to anyone that might check it, etc., etc. The next time the watch is just hot, the next time the watch is just warm, and the time after that, well, I don't exactly know where it come from, I think it's okay. And all of a sudden, you end up with it being sold on the open market and is retrieved by one of the manufacturers when sent in for service. And I think most of the gangs that operate at this sort of level operate in a very similar fashion to the one I've just described, almost creating their own economy, if you like, and their own financial system. They're actually quite well run. You can spot these people in and around London. I was up in Selfridges a couple of weeks back, in and around New Bond Street, and I spied quite a few very young lads who I consider to be part of these gangs who are, for me at least, almost certainly wearing watches with a very dubious background. Then there's the more sinister type of watch theft and the more sinister type of watch crime, often carried out by extremely well organised masked gangs who attack high-end boutiques. You've obviously seen all the videos, you've heard all about it, you don't need me to explain it. Now, I feel that in many cases this is a far more experienced, far more organised, probably far more dangerous gang group of people who are very well organised. They're violent, they're prepared to use extreme violence to get what they want. And I hate to say this, it's a horrible thing to say, but I do believe that within the watch community, within the watch dealing world, there are dealers, of course, there are bad apples in every basket. And there's no question that there are dealers out there, probably just about in every country in the entire world, let's be frank, and it really pains me to say this, but there are unquestionably dealers out there who are quite happy to accept stolen watches, knowing full well they're stolen, or to satisfy their own conscience, they'll maybe say, well look, I don't really care where they come from, but just don't tell me. But that's not really much of an excuse, is it? They know damn well where they're coming from, they just don't really want to hear the full story, and they'll deal with people from under the counter, if you like. This is something that I know takes place. I can honestly say, I can truthfully say that in all the years that I've been involved in watch dealing, I've never actually met a watch dealer that I have known to deliberately deal in stolen watches. But that's probably because of the company that I've kept. I have been at watch fairs abroad, I've been in places overseas where dealers have offered me watches, and they have been quite open and said to me, because they know I'm a dealer, they know I'm probably going to be at the next show, or they know they're probably going to, you know, bump into me again, and rather than have the hassle, they'll just say to me, look, you know, I'm not entirely sure of this watch's history. Now that's code word, isn't it? That's a code language for saying, look, this watch is stolen, this watch is hot, be careful to whom you sell it and how you sell it. I've never ever been tempted to buy a watch like that ever in my life, simply because what's the point? You know that all you're doing is borrowing money, aren't you? You know, you can sell it to someone, but you know damn well that somewhere down the line you're going to get a knock on the door or a phone call from the police to say, hey, you've got to refund this person this money because the watch is stolen. You don't get the watch back either, so you've lost the money completely, you've lost the watch. It's just, you just don't go there. But there are some people who just can't resist what they consider to be a bargain, and they just can't get greed out of their system. So I guess that leaves the question unanswered of how can we eradicate, or how can we try and slow down the rate and the pace of watch crime, which seems to be ever increasing. Well, when we look back in the 1970s, for example, when I was growing up and a teenager, armed robbery in the street, for example, Securicor vans, etc., was probably a weekly or at least a monthly occurrence right up and down the country. Men wearing masks, brandishing sawn-off shotguns would hold up Securicor vans, etc., and steal the money that was inside the van. These days, that's a thing of the past, and it's been eradicated through technology and, to some degree, sentencing. I think sentencing plays a major role in all of this. When people are caught for these crimes, the courts and the judges in charge of these courts really do need to dish out some extremely heavy sentences to send a message out to people who steal watches. Look, if you're caught, this is what you're going to get. And all the time the courts keep dishing out fairly lenient sentences to people involved in these criminal empires, we're never going to eradicate watch crime. And of course, from a technology viewpoint as well, technology also has a massive role to play in the retrieval of stolen watches, and more importantly, in the prevention of their theft in the first place. Look guys, without going over old ground, you know I'm a massive advocate of Rolex reinstating the availability of their international lost and stolen watch register to just about anyone that wants or needs access to it. Because right now, as I stand here today in August 2020. The watch thieves know that the odds are currently stacked in their favour, and all the time those odds are stacked in their favour, the ordinary everyday victim in the street has less and less chance of their watches ever being recovered or the thieves ever being prosecuted. And finally, I guess the last thing, or the last piece of advice that I could offer you, and who am I to advise anyone, but look guys, at the end of the day, I've been running some videos recently where victims of crime have been interviewed. It's something that I will continue to do until hopefully one day Rolex reconsider their decision not to reinstate the official lost and stolen register. Guys, look, listen, the one thing that comes across from just about everyone that I speak to in the watch world that's been a victim of crime, myself included, up until the very first day that it happened to me, everyone has something in common. And I'll tell you what that is. They never thought it would happen to them. My experience tells me that it's time now. It really is time for you guys to consider very carefully when and where you watch, who is watching you potentially, and your surroundings and the positions that you're potentially putting yourself in. If you drive around in any big city now in the UK wearing an expensive watch, particularly in the hot weather, in traffic, and you are wearing an expensive watch, you're a target. You may not have ever thought about that before, but you are unquestionably a target. People are driving around looking for drivers in expensive cars, wearing expensive watches, making them a target, maybe even following them to their home. I even had a tracker found on my motor vehicle once where someone was trying to track where I was living. Guys, it's unbelievable, and this situation is not going to go away until the authorities actually get together. It's all a piece of a big ugly jigsaw, isn't it? We need the courts to be dishing out heavier sentences, we need the manufacturers to start playing ball, and we need the police to show much greater willing than they currently do when it comes to watch crime, watch theft and watch violence. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Always interested to hear what you guys have got to say. I read every single reply. I can't reply to messages, guys, I just haven't got the time, but I do promise you that I read every single reply that you leave me. Thanks for watching, and we'll speak again soon.